No, Johnny just misscheduled. It's all good.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It says you are live, but where are we?
Where is it? Go away. Go away. There we go.
Oh wait, we lost Josh.
Oh.
Okay. Something's happening here, guys. I don't know what it is, but we lost Josh for a second. But I'm gonna go ahead.
The YouTube stream is still not. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Here we are. What's up, everybody? No fancy countdown. This is the rough version. I'm not with my production manager this week, but I got a cool crew here. This is our blue team. Yes, I'm a big enough of a dork that I named our 2-day event with our guests, the gold team and the blue team. So this is our blue team for our new X-Men discussion. Let's see here. Get that overlay off of here. All right, look, we already got like a heart. So, and like 6 people already watching. So let's do this. To my left, probably to you guys' right, is Rocco Jerome, who's new to the stream. What's up, Rocco?
What's happening, man? Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
You want to throw out some credits real quick? I know you just did Image Grand Disaster, right?
Design. I had nothing really to do with Disaster. It was the editor, maybe project manager would have been a more apt title, but
okay.
That ship has sailed. Editor, it is.
All right.
It's available if you can find it.
All right, cool. And I mean, it's an impressive book. So, hit up, I think it's Cosmic Lion Productions.
Thanks. Yeah, if you go to imagegranddesign.com, you can still download it for a donation of $5.
Okay.
All the money goes to the Hero Initiative because we are not keeping any of it. Image Lawyers, Jim Lee's Lawyers, Wildstorm, Warner Brothers, all you guys who may be paying attention, none of the money is for us. We're giving it to a good cause.
Doing it for free, just because they love you guys' product. They love Image Comics, and they want to document the history in their own unique way. So definitely give that a shout out and check that out. Down here is Josh Mendez, who was on the show last week and is joining us again. What's up, Josh? How's it going, man?
Hey, everything is cool, man. Super excited. I wanted to participate in Image Grand Design, man, but I joined later on after these guys already started production.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, I will be able to participate in Wizard number 2. I'm super excited for the piece of art that I'm going to be doing. I'm gonna give you a tease, guys. It's gonna be imagine that Image Comics could have touched DC Comics in a cool way, and 10 titles that you didn't know that you needed.
Okay, I like that. That's cool. Looking forward to that, Josh. Looking forward to that. And also returning for, I think, this is your 3rd or 4th time. We love him because he's very opinionated and he has some good points to make. Welcome, Mystical Green Beanie, wearing his Mystical Green Beanie. What's up, Joaquin? Oh, are you muted?
Oh man, I said something pretty clever too. Oh well. Hey, what's up, guys?
There you go. So yeah, look, this isn't going to be a refined stream, guys. I apologize, but I have pictures, which is cool. All right, and so let's dive into it. So we made it out of the Black Bug room, and now we're heading to the White Hot room, right? And this is our new X-Men stream for part 2. So if you missed part 1, we covered everything from East for Extinction up until Riot at Xavier's. And now, hold on, I lost Josh for a second. There you go. And now we're going to do Riot at Xavier's to the grand finale. Here Comes Tomorrow. First of all, one of the things you guys pointed out to me over the week when our little private chat for the X-Men was Morrison's manifesto, right? Which kind of lays out like what he fully intended to do. And I think a lot of people don't quite understand what this run is when they're some of the more critical views of this run is that his run was kind of cut short and kind of had the legs kicked out from under it. Now you can place blame on whoever you want to for that, But Morrison had a very grand plan, and the manifesto lays that out pretty effectively. And he didn't get to execute everything, and I don't think he would have been able to execute everything in the story because there's some pretty wild ideas in that manifesto, right? But there were also some stuff that, like, if editorial had been willing to roll with him, he would have pulled it off. Josh, did you get a chance to look at the manifesto? Was there anything that kind of jumped out at you since you brought it up?
It's something that I have read only parts of it. I have read the initial way that he pitched New X-Men, how it was going to be to return to getting that grandiose drama, the energy, being a cool comic, a hip comic. I really love about that approach that he had. Then all the crazy ideas that he may have along the way. And then I remember reading anywhere, like there were some notes that somebody did there, like, trying like, this might not work there or here, but like the original energy that he had, you could feel that he was pumped, super excited to be working on the book. I think it was the second Marvel book that he was going to be. He had already done a lot of damage at DC, great stuff there. So of course, having the Ferrari of Marvel, he was going to bring his A game, but suddenly he was stopped.
And we were also robbed of some really good stuff too. Rocco, you look like you're about to say something. Were you going to jump in?
The manifesto, I actually read it. It's good that I'm on this particular team because this was the point at which I started reading New X-Men in real time. At the time, I was sort of spotty on Big Two Comics, not out of any sort of like, anger at the man or something, but it was just there didn't seem to be a whole lot that was coming out at the time.
Right.
It was really interesting to me. I was reading Ecstatics, which was X-Force before that.
Yep.
And I love that. And I think I got the first issue of the Morrison run, and for whatever reason, I didn't keep with it. I think at that time I was kind of already buying a lot of trades and stuff, and really kind of coming back into sort of quote unquote like superhero type comics. So the manifesto was something I read before I read most of what he was doing.
Wow.
It was at the back of the first trade, and I was like, well, let's get an idea of what this is. And I was familiar with Morrison, but not like I wasn't like a huge Morrison head at that point. I kind of missed a lot of what he was doing. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about that was that they talked about how these movies had come out, they were a big hit, and then it didn't really move the needle on the comic sales, which of course is not atypical. Like, I don't know about you, but all my friends that have kids, I can't get them to read a comic book to save their life, but they love what they think Marvel is because so that would be an ongoing trend. But it was like the X-Men sales didn't move, and they needed to do something to sort of like shock the machine. And it's one of those deals where it's like, if you look at like Quentin Tarantino, for example, who may be a pretty good analog to what Morrison is to comics. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is not a movie a first-time director could make because lots of money got poured into that.
Yeah.
So it was sort of one of those deals where it's like the very risky stuff that they got to do in New X-Men was all because they kind of felt like they had their backs against the wall, and Morrison was $1 million name.
Yeah, at the time, it just came off of Justice League, right?
Yeah, so it's like, okay, sure, play with all these toys.
Right. So. No, I think the framing of this, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think the framing of this is very important. Like, I really do think this is a matter of time, space, and place. Marvel had just come off of bankruptcy, right? And they were trying to kind of just realign things so that they can be back in good standing just in general. And so I think this is why this era is, and we've talked about this privately, Joaquin, but this is why this era in comics period is actually one of my favorites, because we had the 90s boom, right? Things got really high in terms of like, just in terms of creators becoming well known and like the paychecks and all this other stuff. And then the speculative market happened and that crash happened, right? And it affected everybody. And there's also some of the other stuff with Marvel and the Heroes World stuff that also followed suit. But it was just a very experimental time because of that, because they were just like, something's got to work. What will work? And so that's why we got New X-Men. And I think that really shows, because it really is unlike any other X-Men run before. Joaquin, anything you want to throw in there? I know that the early 2000s is your heyday too.
Actually, it's kind of crazy. I know I'm gonna be kind of like the odd man out of this crew, but because I kind of grew up reading comics and getting into like nerd stuff in the early 2000s, my introduction, specifically the X-Men, is the movies, and then kind of like looking at how there's that movie influence in some of the.
Sorry, that was me. This guy go.
But yeah, like just like seeing some like the parallels between like the movies and the comics and whatnot. So for me, like kind of just getting into the X-Men in that time period, especially with Mark Millar and Andy Kubert's Ultimate X-Men. For me, it was the X-Men aren't superheroes. They're like, this fringe paramilitary like organization that like wear black leather and like it's that kind of thing. They're science fiction people as opposed to superheroes. So in like just a micro like personal level for me, that's kind of like where the X-Men starts. So I have just like a nostalgia for that material. But regarding the manifesto, which I didn't know about before a couple days ago, fascinating, like really fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's start a hashtag, release the Morrison cut. It's gonna go over great. But yeah, no, it's really interesting seeing how seeing some of the things that Morrison wanted to do and comparing that to what he did. Because I think if you just kind of look at what the X-Men or new X-Men run is on its own as it is, it's still pretty impressive and expansive and revolutionary.
Yeah, I think it only really gets more so with time. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later, because I definitely want to ask you guys about its lasting power, especially since we're revisiting it roughly 20 years later. So yeah, which is pretty impressive.
It's weird to think how long it's been.
I know, right? Isn't that crazy?
And even then, a lot of the stuff that like is just kind of stuck. Like a lot of people, like you can tell creators, despite what Marvel editorial may have or may not have done to cut the legs out from under that run, you can tell a lot of creators definitely were like highly influenced by what Morrison was doing. And I see a lot of people say that it's creators right now who are influenced by Morrison, but I don't think that's the case. I think everybody, like from like Joss Whedon to like Warren Ellis and like all these other guys. Who did the X Factor run?
Peter David.
No, I'm sorry, not X Factor. X Force.
Peter Milligan.
Peter Milligan and Mike Allred.
Yeah, I believe so.
Peter Milligan was in X Force that became Sextatics. Is that the one that you're mentioning?
Yeah, is that what you're talking about?
No, it's
You're talking about maybe the more recent one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
like Psylocke.
Remender.
Yeah. Like Remender, definitely.
Yeah,
and even into like his run on Uncanny Avengers and like Jason Aaron and all the stuff with like the
Wolverine and the X-Men,
and all that stuff, and the Bendis stuff. All that is like directly tied to Morrison's influence up to now. So there's just a clear, consistent influence that Morrison has had over the X-Men title for the past like 16 years, and he hasn't even worked there. So
interesting how that sort of thing sort of shakes out, because what always sort of occurs to me is that like it's out of these moments of sort of like desperation at like a corporate level that births these new ideas.
Exactly.
That then gets sort of recycled over and over again. So like X-Men is one of those things where it's like you go back to the 60s and into the 70s, X-Men was not a well-performing book. It was really like, it wasn't even a second thought. It was like Daredevil was a second thought. X-Men third thought. Like there's a huge chunk of X-Men comics that are all just reprints because nobody cared. And then it was almost like a tryout book, and they would just sort of put whoever on it, and reading it had to have been sort of a chore at the time. And then it was just sort of like, well, we can either cancel it or we can try to make it a new thing. Yeah. And by making it a new thing, it became this massive success you get into Claremont and Cockrum and the Claremont and Byrne, and the Dark Phoenix saga becomes like one of the great tomes of comics.
Yeah.
And then over time, you just kind of start to keep hitting that note. And the more successful it becomes, the more gilded becomes the cow, the less you can do with the cow, the less you're allowed to do. And then it sort of takes it to have to get more and more to the point where it's boring enough that the sales aren't there anymore and people are no longer just buying it out of habit, that they get to shoot it with something and try something new. And like now, since up until pretty recently, Disney didn't own the X-Men as far as a movie concerned, something beyond comics.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how we're able to get maybe some interesting ideas now. Somebody else can speak more to that than me because I'm not reading it, but that's not neither here nor there. It's not because
I think the current Hickman run is a byproduct of like, we got to do something with this. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, now of course, like, comics might not be as popular as they were in the 90s, but at the same time, like, there was a need to kind of mix it up. You know what I mean? So I don't think that's I don't think it's an accident. And I actually think it speaks to what I feel is like the most central theme of X-Men, which is evolution. And so every time this franchise gets stagnant, every couple of years, someone shows up who's like, I'm gonna kick it all over. And it feels right to me anyway. It feels right when they do that, as opposed to, like I said, hitting those same notes over and over again.
I'll be honest, when that upsets fans, I love that. I had a moment when, to go back to the X-Force book, which I was with from day one, the Milligan book, Milligan and Ard book. The day that came out, there was a guy in my local comic shop who was like furiously angry and bitching to everybody about it, talking to the owner, and was like, "How can they do that?" And it was just like, "Can you please just put your tears in a cup so I can drink them?" I just love how much you hate this. I love
and also the thing that I think is kind of funny about that is that while I do certainly understand the knee-jerk reaction, and I do think, contrary to what a lot of other people who are smarter than me like to say, that you can't have those. I think there's merit to them because it shows that you did care about a thing. But I also think a lot of times, a lot of the judgment should be reserved for the thinking that comes after the knee-jerk reaction, which I see a lot of people, because I used to work in a comic book shop, Alliance Comics on Fenton Street, great shop by the way. But I do see this a lot in the comic book stores and even on the YouTube, that like initial outrage of like, you made Bobby Drake gay. It's like,
or something.
Like were you reading an Iceman book?
Right.
Did you really care about it?
Right. Were you really like jumping over people?
Yeah.
This is your fault for not buying those comic books.
Exactly. And like a lot of people who like kind of, it's kind of the funny thing about X-Men. I know a lot of people, specifically with the Hickman stuff. I can't speak for the Morrison stuff because I'm not that old. Sorry. But especially with the Hickman stuff going on right now, a lot of people like had like a conniption. It's like, you made the X-Men villains. It's like, were you reading the X-Men book? I can tell you what those sales figures were. The X-Men was selling really poorly. Like really poorly.
Yeah. I mean, they've been overtaken by the Avengers for like these last couple of years. So I mean, decade.
Which you go back to when I was
when people complain about the books, it happens every time. I remember that people was complaining when he was doing Riot at Xavier's, and if you turn back 20 years now, it's amazing. It's those 4 issues are. Yeah. He went out of the gate with that. I remember that in the manifesto he mentions that part, right? Like the new energy, the new characters, and he brings it all home, right? Like these characters. If you thought that Big was lame, and then you got this guy with one eye. What's his name?
I know you're talking about.
The blobby guy.
Yeah.
See-through?
Yep. Yeah.
I just know him as
Basilisk,
Human Torch.
Basilisk, and then you got Noger, and then you got Marla, which is a brain in a bubble. I mean, that was amazing, and he was.
It was crazy. Those were X-Men books compared to what we were used to.
Yeah.
And then how he was able to inject the energy from movies like Clockwork Orange or If, right? Like the youth being rebellious and continuing talking about that theme that he started in the first other chapters of New X-Men about new replacing the old. the youth versus I don't know, like the old people or whatever. Such amazing, and still, as I think it was or someone else that mentioned previously that about a conspiracy theory that Frank quietly only joined when there were good stories in the in the run, but because Riot at Xavier is amazing, that's
It
like
is.
a movie, right?
It is. I actually forgot that. Actually, thanks for lobbing it up because we're going to start with Riot at Xavier's. I actually forgot that Quietly doesn't actually draw the first story in Riot at Xavier's. I completely forgot about it. Then I revisited and I was like, oh, that's right. He doesn't write the first story. So here, let me do a quick recap of Riot at Xavier's real quick. Professor Xavier's School for the Gifted is a sanctuary, a safe haven for oppressed mutant youth. But the unimaginable happens when a student reinvents himself as Kid Omega and decides to take over the school. It's mutant versus mutant. Will the school ever be the same? So, all right, let's jump into this, guys. Like, can I get back to everybody? Still trying to figure this out. All right. I accidentally kicked Joaquin off. All right.
Oh no.
But yeah, let's talk about Riot at Xavier's first. So, Josh, you haven't been able to say much so far. Why don't you kick things off? What do you think of Riot at Xavier's? Can you delve into it a little bit more?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I did not hear my name. I think it was great. Again, they did a lot of great stuff there. When I read it, it was like, this is like, it's okay. But then, like 5 years later, I read it, and I thought it was amazing. I felt that energy, like when you're watching Clockwork Orange, just kids out there trying to change the world in their own way, but being rebellious and an anarchist, right? I was kind of a letdown because I really like the look of the characters whenever I read stories. So seeing that the bad guys were just with those sleeve and boots, and it was like, But again, when I'm watching Clockwork Orange, it's the same thing. These guys are not wearing anything fancy, and the story is the one that drives that. But later on, when you see the final chapter of Kid Omega, when he's dying, when he's in kind of like a bathtub, and Xavier puts him away, or Soren is the one that puts him away in his misery, there's a shot of Xavier and you see his face. And here's what Morrison excels at, like the metaphoric stuff that he talks about in his stories, how Xavier's shadow becomes one of the members from the Omega gang. And that blew me away.
Oh, wow.
It also blew me away the way that he uses the powers with these guys, like how Blob was just like this huge pink pile of goo, and then how he becomes the Inhuman Torch, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, these guys are like neo-Nazis, right? But for mutants. So those topics are very hard to nail and hard not to offend anyone. But I think that he really did it great in this comic. And like a good teenager, everything was because to impress a girl, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or 5 girls in this case.
That's the ultimate. I think that's the ultimate wonderful thing about this. And there's that great line right towards the end where, like, I think it's right before this, where Quentin says, "I did this for you, Esme," and they're all like, "Ew, gross." And I just think it's so. Also, I gotta say. And I'm sorry, guys. I'll jump over to you in a second. But here it is. This moment. First of all, it's a hilarious
I was
line.
looking for it.
Yeah.
Oh
It's
my
a
God.
hilarious line, but also the artwork. Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is the type of images that when people say like, "Oh man, I don't know if Frank Whiteley he draws too simple." If you see this image, like doing that breakdown from the nerve to the muscles to the body, naked body, and then the image, like he does it right. Like this image is complex, and then having the silhouettes of the other 4 step for Cuckoos and the one in the middle guiding them. This is good stuff. You don't find it everywhere in any panel.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that transcends those runs.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Joaquin? What do you think of old Riot at Xavier's?
So Riot at Xavier's is my favorite arc for this run. I kind of in a way see this as somewhat of the thesis well, not the thesis, but like like this kind of encapsulates everything that Morrison's run is all about.
Yeah.
With the X-Men regarding it's about the next generation. It's about evolution. This whole thing is about the children of the future. And what I think is so fascinating about Riot at Xavier's is, well, one, it's steeped in the idea that the school has evolved. You know, instead of it just being like a training ground for like, you know, child soldiers, now it's a school. It's like an actual school for children to like learn.
And that's hilarious to me because like it never occurred to me until he did this that like, you know what, they hadn't gone the distance with that before, which is hilarious. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Joaquin.
But yeah, no, I think with it being a school where it's a place of academia and you have all these different children with like radical ideas and like raging hormones, but also like like these children are like oppressed, but like they're like an actual like, minority group of people who did kind of grow up watching the X-Men on TV and like watching Magneto deliver these like fatwas, say like I'm going to like kill the president if you don't do this, blah blah blah. Like seeing that and then growing up in that environment, of course you're gonna get a kid like Quentin Quire who like rallies this like, you know, like radicalizes this gang of children to say Magneto was right. You know, like it's the Che Guevara T-shirt. It's the like the kids who like what exactly? Yeah, it's the thing where like, you know, kids like go to like beer pong tattoo parties and like they get like Stalin tattooed on their chest because like it's no, he was right, man. Stalin was right. Throw people in gulags. Like it's that thing. It's that idea of the generations before not. And just by virtue of not getting their ish together, they kind of sow the seeds for like these children who do want a brighter future, but they don't know how to fight for it in a productive manner because the adults didn't.
Right. No, I think that's perfect. Actually, that's a great.
But even like on a more simplistic kind of like childish level, you have Quentin who like did all this and he was like, no, it was for the revolution and it was for Jumbo Kunkarion because he was killed by humans and that whole like I think that's fascinating, especially within a modern context, given everything that's been going on in the country the past couple years, seeing how this book is actually more relevant now than it was in 2003. But I like that idea that, you know, you have this kid who's touting all these ideas about no, we're oppressed and it's the humans' fault and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, he's like, I did it for a girl because she's cute.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Like that, and it's that thing where I think Morrison's run is recognized for being as like this revolutionary like thing that just completely like remixes the X-Men. But I don't think it really does that. I think Morrison is more so like deconstructing the X-Men in a way where he's just kind of picking apart the entire thing, and he's looking at, okay, what is the singular focus of what's the nucleus of the X-Men?
Yes,
it's teen drama, it's science fiction people that are a metaphor for racism and otherness, and it's, you know, the legacy of oppression. And he just kind of like takes those things and he just kind of like blows them up into this like large scale and does it differently in the same way that Claremont and Byrne did it differently. In the same way that Hickman is doing it differently. You're just kind of taking the same concept but like making it, you know, you're like spinning it a different way.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think this whole thing's brilliant.
What about you, Rocco? Some thoughts on Riot at Xavier's?
So the main thing that struck me, like Quentin and these kids are supposed to be like what, 15 or 16 years old, like mid-teens. I don't think they ever
I'd say about 16.
To me, it was sort of like, you know, like you guys are a bit younger than me, I think, and for me, I'm just very fortunate that when I was going through different phases as a teen and a young man, the internet wasn't where it is now, and there's not any recordings of some of the dumb stuff I was coming up with. So it's like, you know, these kids they're trying on different things. That frontal lobe is not formed yet, but they're at the age where they've reached the level of awareness that they realize they have opinions and they can say things. And when I look at this, I don't see like a team of menacing supervillains. I see a bunch of kids who are on some scary ideas, who are on some stuff that's going to get somebody killed, that if they live long enough, they'll regret it and they'll look back on it and be a little bit ashamed and say, hey, I had the wrong idea about some things. And to me, that was what really hit hard about that. It was strong. And, it's one of those things in comics where if you look at the X-Men concepts early on and even well into the 90s, because it seemed like they only really kind of hit on that misfits, otherness, when it felt like it was convenient to do so, right? And the X-Men all looked like models and actors, and there were very few people of color. Initially, there were none. And they would still say, like, this is, that Stan Lee, like, this is an allegory for civil rights. And it's like, to look at that cynically, it just sort of seems like you're just kind of trying to make sure that you get your stuff name checked in Rolling Stone, and that there's sort of just like it's done sort of performatively. It doesn't really follow through. And then as comics, those types of comics especially, go along, and maybe we can say evolve. You get to a point where we look at them more pragmatically and seriously, and I think maybe one of the easiest sets of characters to look at with that lens is, the DC pantheon, where it's like, okay, you have like this super serious world where people can get murdered and raped and everything else, but the most powerful guy in the world, you still don't know who he is when he puts his glasses on.
Right. You're right.
So, like, how seriously do we really take this? Like, how much is this really like something to be taken seriously on that level? And I think that this is an instance where it's done very well, because it really, I felt like this whole arc really nailed what it felt like to be a kid. And as an older person, why kids are scary, because they're still that kid, but just the synapses are firing in such a way. And now he's got purple hair, and now he's talking about people who deserve to die. It's like, you're not there yet. You're not there yet, but you can still drive. You still have these abilities, and you have a loaded weapon. Yeah, that was something that I thought was really strong about that. And the other thing, the character's name was Jumbo. Is that right?
Jumbo Carnation.
That was sort of. I know that there had been LGBTQ characters that had been touched upon before in the mutant world, but this was the first time where it felt like it was really being dealt with in a way that was legitimately thought-provoking, in my opinion. Like, I felt like North Star, like John Byrne always meant for him to be gay, and they wouldn't let him do it. So then it took years later for them to go back to it, and there's something about that character that, to me, I thought was really powerful, because it implicitly brought LGBTQ people into that sort of idea of mutants being people that are misfits, that are other, that have that otherness to them. And I feel like the more you can do that, the better, And there's a few parts of the Morrison run that hit really hard and are really emotionally affecting. And I feel like a lot of them were in this particular story arc.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm glad that you mentioned how serious do you take this? Because I think that's something that Morrison does really well during the course of this. Like, he's approaching it like, he's looking at the legacy, and he's clearly doing the research, and he's like, breaking it all down. So he's definitely taking it seriously. But then at the same time, you'll get lines like, I think after Jumbo Carnation died, one of the police officers is like, he's asking Beast, what would you call this? And Cyclops kind of just dismissively goes, homicide superior. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like he's still having fun with it, despite the fact that he's also just like really like grabbing onto this, and like, we're going to like focus in on this and like run with it.
Well, and you mentioning that too is that one of the things that I like about Morrison's whole run is that mutants are sort of treated as like something beyond or different from humans.
Yes,
absolutely. Right? Like, in the older comics, they're just superheroes, basically. And like, the rest can be fan theories for kids that think way too much about these things, that grow up to be adults that do these types of broadcasts. But there's a lot of points in which you can see that they sort of have, and nothing makes this grow stronger than being made to feel from the outside world like you don't belong in theirs. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's this sense of like, well, then we are our own thing. Mm-hmm. We can do this. And it's like there's been parts of the Marvel Universe along the way where it's sort of insinuated that like mutants can all heal faster than most people. Like if you break your arm, it might take a normal person a month, but a mutant can do it in 2.5 weeks. Like there's sort of like all these little things that it's like, well, okay, you don't like us, we don't like you either. And this is our world.
Right. I actually enjoyed seeing Beast lean into that too. Actually, a little bit during this run, he's kind of like, like humans kind of bug me.
Yeah, yeah. And you're allowed to feel that way.
You can see it with Kid Omega with his T-shirt, right? Like Magneto was right, being a mutant and being proud about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Joaquin, what are you about to say?
No, I also just kind of like the reveal that Jumbo Carnation he wasn't killed by mutants. It wasn't a homicide. You said it. Mm-hmm. It was a drug overdose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I there's something really nuanced about the way Morrison plays with these concepts of like race relations and like the just the idea of outrage and sometimes and like it's justified outrage. Yeah. But like it's also like a misplaced sense of anger. It's like, oh no, they did it because they always hate us. And it's like, well, they didn't do it this time. This Jumbo Carnation, he was a celebrity, and celebrities do drugs, and then he had an overdose. It happens. So I get your anger, but it's misplaced. And it does kind of vilify these children because they do end up like ganging up and nearly killing like a group of just regular human dudes outside of a bar. Mm-hmm. In the name of like, mutantdom. So yeah, I think that whole idea is fascinating. But to what you were saying earlier, Troy, about Morrison kind of taking the material seriously, there's a quote from Frank Miller actually that I think really applies to not just this run, but everything Morrison does. But like you definitely hear where he says, "I don't write realistically; I write believably." Yeah. Like if you write, Batman story realistically, well, then Bruce Wayne's going to trip over his cape and then fall off a building and die. Right. But the thing I like about what Morrison does, and this is like way early in the run, but there's a whole conversation that Scott's having with Emma Frost where he's describing an encounter that he had with Apocalypse, and he's like, "Well, I got possessed by this bad guy named Insaba Newer," and Emma just looks at him like, "Bad guy." Like she just has this whole thing in her. It's like, oh, you guys like see the world like children,
binary, right?
Yeah, it's. I like how Morrison does that throughout this whole run, where he is self-aware of the fact that the Marvel universe is it's this like kind of silly, crazy world where people run around in spandex and punch each other and like throw each other through buildings and whatnot, but there's also this real world lens that just regular people have.
You're right. Yeah. Outside of all the superhero stuff. Right. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's something that's like really refreshing about Morrison's run. He kind of like does the thing where like he pulls out for a second and like he just says, okay, there's superheroes in this world. Like it's not a superhero world. Superheroes just live in this world.
Right. Yeah.
There's regular people around them that just have to deal with these like.
Right, which is Marvel. I think that's Marvel, like to a T. Actually, you lobbed up something for me that I wanted to talk about, guys. We got to talk about this, and this will lead us into Murder at the Mansion.
Oh yeah, man.
Yes.
Oh
my goodness. First time that I see cleavage on Jean Grey, and the previous page too. So that the whole affair thing went out of the gate in these issues of Riot and Xavier, right? Where they really go the whole 9 yards with it.
Yeah, I think this is something that's really kind of interesting because Scott Summers is a character that I often hear people critique as like being a like a boring like goody two shoes character. But I think Morrison really kind of, in a way, by leaning into the fact that Scott Summers is like kind of just a good guy who's trying his hardest to just be a good guy. There's some like room for deconstruction where Morrison's saying, okay, but he's trying too hard, and he's trying too hard because there is something deep inside of him that doesn't want to be that.
Yeah.
And it's that thing that I know a lot of people get really tired of the deconstruction of like the good guy characters, but I do think it's interesting to kind of like point out that like, oh, but they're trying, and like men are. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and speak on behalf of all men, but like, come on, man, it's Emma Frost, dog. But I like how even then he gives Emma nuance, where you have that whole thing where like Murder at the Mansion, or just before Murder at the Mansion, where Jean just deconstructs Emma, and you see exactly why Emma is the way she is, and why she's going for a married man, and how Scott is kind of like weak after his encounter with Insabanur, but also how he's just kind of going on his own like journey of like self rediscovery after being the captain of all captains, or is the captain of all captains? Yeah, like he's always the right hand man who does the bidding of like the men above him. He has to become the boss at the end, and I think this kind of laid the groundwork for that really nicely.
Yeah. Well, here, let me jump over to real quick the explanation of Murder at the Mansion. So the synopsis, well, first of all, Murder at the Mansion was 139 through 141. Phil Jimenez took over the artwork. This was actually the first time I ever saw Phil Jimenez art. And I definitely took to it immediately. Definitely reminds me of George Perez. I'm sure I'm not the first person to mention that. But the plot for Murder at the Mansion, there's two things I love. Well, there's quite a few things I love about this. Some of which you just mentioned, Joaquin. One of the things I love is Jimenez did a nice little Terminator cover tribute with Bishop, which is so perfect because Bishop is also a man out of time. But the synopsis goes like this: Bishop and Sage arrive at the school to begin their investigation into the death of one of the staff. Everybody is a suspect, but who did it? So yeah, let's go around here and talk about this a little bit. Looks like you got something to say, Rocco. What's up?
I love this run, and it's one of those situations where, like I hate to keep like veering back into talking about DC, but it's just there's a lot of good analogies here. Mm-hmm. To my feeling, Batman Returns is one of the most adult, like legitimately adult superhero movies ever made.
Oh, for sure.
And I could say that based on just like a 3 or 4 minute sequence where you have Bruce Wayne and you have Selena Kyle, and they're dancing at the ball, and they figure out who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, does this mean we have to start fighting now? Mm-hmm. Like, what is this? What is this?
Right.
And it's because they've figured out that they have this kink. Basically.
Yeah, basically.
And all kinds of people have them. It's not just like people who go to hedonism for and, spend a weekend wife swapping. Like, it's like everybody sort of has this stuff. So Scott has been through these tremendous traumas, but he's so just like uptight that it's that, thank you, sir. May I have another, like basically like almost like what, like the Barry Bostwick and Rocky Horror Picture Show, where he's the square, and it's all, he's just buried all of it, right? And then Emma is kind of a freak, right?
Right.
Like, she's a mutant, so it's like she's a freak with a little freak added, basically.
Right.
And it's like, Jean Grey, the whole thing with the Dark Phoenix, that turned him on. And that was a thing that, like, there was a switch inside of his head that was still there no matter what, and he didn't want it to be there. Like, he buried that whole idea, and then she hits on that. So that's, I think, some of the most brilliant stuff that Grant Morrison did on this whole run. My girlfriend at the time, who happened to be a redhead, that's neither here nor there, she was really into the movies, and she didn't care about comic books, and like, we just didn't talk about comics. It just wasn't a thing. And I was like, you need to read this. Let me give you a little background. She turned into a thing called the Phoenix and almost destroyed the universe. Then she died and was dead for a while, leaving Scott by himself. And it's like he's a widower. The last time he saw his woman, she was the Dark Phoenix in that getup, lighting the world on fire.
You're right.
Like just so much smart stuff in that. And then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then this was, and this will change the subject, so please feel free to make this an addendum. But the first time I thought Bishop was like really cool was during this storyline.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I love the. I mean, I think District X probably was around this time, so I was very much into the idea of Bishop being a detective.
Yeah, this made me go and get into that.
Yeah. So I really did enjoy that, and it's not the first time, but this period for Bishop was actually really interesting to me. I actually wanted to throw in real quick. You mentioned the kink thing, and I did want to point this out. Going back and reading some of the X-Men in the '80s, I feel like that's really where. And I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm not speaking for Claremont. This is just what I've gotten from this,
this
right?
Is for previews, right? Let's be
But we were talking about the whole the outsider mentality. I think that the thing Claremont probably tapped into a little bit with the early X-Men in the '80s was like the BDSM kink thing. I feel like that's where the otherness really kind of plays out over the course of his X-Men run, and especially in the '80s. There's always kind of like this element of something's just like not 100% square. This is not a square superhero book. Like there's something else going on underneath the surface, and you really got to get to see elements of that with characters like Storm and Emma Frost, et cetera, et cetera. So I just thought that was interesting. And I think Morrison tapped into that. So. Josh, what do you think about Murder at the Mansion?
Murder at the Mansion was great. It was a good mystery, and Morrison is very smart, right? Like he did not took too much time trying to figure out who the murderer was. I think it was in number 2 where they revealed, or even in part 1 where they revealed who the murderer was, but then it threw you off like it was this person. No, it was not that. It was this other one. So it was good, right? It kept you going to really determine what was going on. And again, character-wise, were very good because I knew that somehow they were going to revive Emma Frost, but I didn't know how. And it was very smart because when I saw this image, like, oh my God, she's going to be left with a lot of scars, and she's not going to be the same herself. But then suddenly you have Phoenix putting everything together with that Phoenix super glue. And that was great, like a very cool twist. But then you start seeing some other stuff that that Morrison was more interested, like what was going on with the consequences of the decision that Angel and Vic took in Riot and Xavier's, where they were having sex, right? And this in this run we can see it. We see the consequences of that. And what you were mentioning, the otherness, it's being shown here when they go to that shack, when they see these things, that otherness is present, and Morrison is playing with us. Like every single page, every single number, he is defying our expectations of what the X-Men were going to be, because we have already read, I don't know, like 25 years, 30 years, or more than that, 45 years of X-Men stories. So he knew that people was expecting something different, and he was delivering that. Phil Jimenez art is amazing. It's a great artist. I think that he might be in competition for the either third spot in the entire X-Men run of artists that Grant was working with. And then the other thing that caught my attention was like the way that he deconstructed the psychic defenses that Emma Frost had, how Jean Grey was able to really do a number on her, right? Like showing all the lowest points that she had, but nothing was lowest, that having her fail as a headmaster for the Alliance.
Yeah. I love that actually. I love that they brought that back up, which is because this is something that like I've always read about, but I've never seen the consequences of it necessarily. So to kind of see Morrison actually pull into that again, we mentioned this before. Like people accused him of like not really following continuity, but that's a continuity pull right there.
Yep.
Like that's a big character moment for Emma that like Fabian Nicieza has tapped into, Scott Lobdell's tapped into before him, and then he just kind of presented it in a new and interesting way. So absolutely.
Yeah, so something that I'm left wondering was the title District X came out because of Bishop in this run, or it was already going on and then
that was already going on.
Guest appearance here.
Yeah, I think that was concurrent. I think that had been going on for a while.
Okay.
Because District X comes out just after, I think, just at like around that like 9/11 period.
Mm-hmm.
I know just because I have the coverage for those, and it's like number one has like the Twin Towers and everything. Yeah, so
on the corner.
Yeah.
But it came out because of Morrison again, right? Because these are crimes that are being committed in Mutant Town. So again, it all goes back to Morrison.
Yeah. Something I kind of wanted to ask you guys about, kind of going back to the alternative sexuality thing with kink and fetish. So I know
we're going to talk about this on Previews World.
Well, this is just a fascinating topic. I know that Cyclops and his brother Havoc are orphans, but did they know their mom?
I feel like that's a subject of an actual.
Because I kind of noticed something, especially when you brought up the fact that Scott has this whole like light bulb moment where he's like, "Oh, Jean, you're gonna destroy the universe." But like he has that whole thing with like women in control. With
Madeline Pryor.
Yeah, with Madeline Pryor too. And then Emma Frost comes along and she's like the diamond mommy dommy type character, and then later on near the end of the run, I think just after this arc, you see Scott in the Hellfire Club, and he's like at the feet of a stripper.
Yep.
Which I think is like a really kind of like fascinating like place to pick up with Scott after this whole thing goes down.
Right, he goes straight to the Hellfire.
Right. And then he tries to play it off. Isn't he like, I can see through this. You're not really who you're trying to be.
Yeah,
right.
No, I was in the mood.
You're right. No, I love that too. Actually, yeah, I thought that was really actually very telling when he has that moment with the stripper at the Hellfire Club, and he's like, "Yeah, this isn't doing it for me. I need you to destroy a planet, of broccoli people." And then it might be.
You're gonna whip me?
I'll conform with
you. I need you to die a couple of times, and like, then I'll be into it. Right?
Put me through like severe emotional trauma, then we'll talk.
So actually, this also brings about. And I actually don't see it in some of the visuals here, but like this is, I think, the issue where we find out at the very end that Zorn is Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big moment. So like, and it's actually a really big moment because it ties into something that I like. It actually took me like, I think like 2 readings to actually catch this, which is that Eric was holding together Xavier's body like the entire time with nano sentinels, like during the course of this run. You're muted, Josh. But yeah, like, and like that, then he like lets them all go and like Xavier's back to not walking again.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think of that twist? And I'll let you go first, Josh, because it looked like you were about to say something.
No. Have we moved to Xavier's? To Weapon X, or we're still with the Murderer Dimension?
Oh, I thought it was at the end of. Maybe it is at the end. Maybe it is Planet X.
Yeah, come on, the booty house threw me off, man.
Sorry.
No. Those numbers were great. Again, it was a killer's row of artists Morrison was working with again. All right.
Yeah.
Chris Bacalo, he was amazing. He was already doing a lot of great things in Generation X. I think he was very not recognized enough. Mm-hmm. The balls that he did, man. I think that he was the only one that he was doing copyright with this type of stuff, like putting liquor. I think that in one of the icebergs of the world, he has a Sony trademark And I don't see that anybody else has done it. Like they were really doing these bold things, and I don't know if the editors did not catch it or not.
He changed a little bit, like he'll do like Jack Daniels with Jake Daniels and stuff like that.
Yeah, and as we were talking the other day, Troy, like Authority is something that we need to talk about, right? But I remember when I was reading Authority, the dialogue, one of the dialogues was like, Jack Hawksmoor goes to the engineer house, and she says like, "Do you want a beer?" And I'm like, these are comic books, right? This is like they're taking it to the next level. I remember those were one of the first conversations when I was looking at these type of things. And this number, the first part of the Weapon X project, it's like that. Like when you see Scott drinking, you see him peeing, and Sabretooth taking a look there, and like, yeah, only Morrison could have done these type of things, and he was able to get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, here it is. Here's that moment too, and I actually love it. Like the two of them just meeting. I also love when Logan's like looking at the old timey picture above the urinal. He's like, "You remind me of a girl I met in 1942."
You have your grandmother's eyes, yeah.
What about you, Rocco? What did you think of Assault on Weapon Plus?
I mean, it was another home run for me, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole aspect of like I think like I feel like that idea that Captain America would have been Weapon 1 or Weapon 2 or 3 or a very early part of an ongoing thing that then the Canadians would be doing with Wolverine. Mm-hmm. That always seemed like a really cool idea that nobody seemed to really want to quite touch, you know, especially through the 80s and 90s, because like being into Wolverine in the 80s when you were a kid, it was kind of like you were on some contraband stuff. It was like your mom hadn't heard of Wolverine. Wolverine would kill people just at his earliest convenience. He smoked, he drank. He was kind of this character that fit in a world where 8-year-olds were watching RoboCop and Aliens, which is what I was.
Yeah, legit. Yeah.
So to sort of begin to put that idea out there and there is a lot of retroactive continuity and a lot of that sort of thing that happens that a lot of times is just ill-advised, I think, and easily and best left aside when a new creative team comes on. I felt like he was doing some stuff that was really moving Wolverine ahead as a character and sort of making that mythology of that character so that it fit into the Marvel universe in a really interesting and cool way. And another thing that came up, and I think I remember this correctly, is that there's a point where they sort of, I forget which character even sort of alludes to this, but like they're like, "Hey, you know what, Wolverine? Your brain has a healing factor too.
Oh, yeah.
The only reason you don't remember this stuff is because you don't want to." And that was heavy.
Right. That is heavy.
Yeah.
That I forgot about that. You're absolutely right. That is a mind F right there, actually.
Yeah. So I thought there was just a lot of really, really cool stuff in this. I mean, in the whole run, but like this one, as far as being like the point that finally this far along in the run, he finally has like some Wolverine stuff, and it's this. It's like, man, you know, Morrison was bringing his A+ ideas on this.
Absolutely.
Johnny Rose mentioned, can we talk about the power play that they have about in the bathroom, right? Oh yeah, he had to do it. He had to measure it, right? It was,
right.
Well, and these are two guys who have hated each other for like over a century.
Right.
You know, it's like we've tried everything. We've tried to be friends. We've fought each other in every type of way imaginable, and now we're just both in a bathroom.
Right, at a strip club.
Neither of us have
He ends up with that at the contest.
Hey man, at that point, all that hatred's gonna build up. Strip club.
But the funny panel is when Sabretooth notices like the size, right? And he has like this realization that like, yeah, he beat me at that too.
Joaquin, what about you? What did you think of Assault on Weapon Plus?
So I'm gonna be like completely honest here. This is where the run kind of starts to lose me.
Okay, interesting.
I don't dislike it. It's just it's such a stark difference from what Morrison was doing versus what he kind of like moved into.
Mhm.
So I think it's really good. Although I also think for me personally, this arc is really wrestling with the Ultimate Universe, where
Mhm.
in a way this is retconning
Oh
that
yeah.
everything kind of like comes from Captain America, and like Wolverine's like a byproduct of like the military industrial complex post World War II and whatnot. And I think those ideas are fascinating. It's just I think in my brain I'm just kind of doing this unconsciously. I'm comparing it too much to the Ultimates. I'm comparing it too much to Ultimate X-Men, where they just kind of start that stuff right out the gate.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I know that like they did that. I think there was a book that Bendis did later on
Yep,
where
that's
they drew direct lines from Captain America to Wolverine, but it's after this. I'm
yeah.
more than sure it's after
Well,
this.
it's after this,
Mhm.
but a lot of the stuff that they do with like all of this like terror throughout the 20th century into the 21st century is the direct result of Captain America and all that stuff.
Mhm.
I mean it's weird. There's a lot of parallels between what Morrison's doing and what Mark Millar is doing because they were like really cool at the time. So there's just going to be a lot of parallels between that stuff, and it's not a situation where like people rip each other off. It's just they're two minds thinking alike.
Well, they also definitely communicated with each other. I think
Yeah.
like from the time, like I remember reading somewhere, it might have been Morrison Super God that he kind of co-wrote Ultimates too. You know what I mean? And they definitely have co-wrote was it his Flash run? Something like that. I can't remember what it was.
They did the Flash together.
Yeah, so they definitely were talking to each other.
Yeah, there's and like they even like kind of co-wrote the ending of Red Sun. So there's definitely like a lot of like overlap of ideas between them. But I just kind of think that for me personally, I like the ideas a lot. I especially love the idea of Wolverine. You just pulled it up too. I love that where Wolverine is talking to this robot about the meaning of life, and it's Wolverine of all people. And it's like, I don't care. That's such a like brilliant moment. I love that so much. And even the reveal of that oh man, what's his name? What a terrible day for brain farts. The Germ, Sublime.
Oh, Sublime.
Oh yeah,
yeah, like the reveal of Sublime here and how that ties the entire thing together. I think that's brilliant. Yeah, I think all the reveals in this like arc are great. It's just the story itself kind of like it starts to lose me because all the ties are coming together. It's a lot and it's a little overwhelming, especially coming off of like the previous two arcs. But
no, I totally understand that.
Now that you mention it, it's great. It's Morrison, right? But yeah, for me, Assault on Weapon Plus and Planet X, it was like really, what the hell is going on, right? I was a little bit lost. I got this like a couple of years ago, and I was reading it.
Nice.
There's a passage on it where Morrison specifically says that Bill Gemas was the one that was telling him how to over
Oh, crap.
story.
Oh no.
Sorry, my bad. I lost you for a second. Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead. I lost you for a second. But
You're saying Bill Gemas.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to quote this part of the book, right? Like where he says, by this time I was working I was coming into regular conflict with Bill Gemas over the direction and execution of my stories. He had been brought in to modernize along with Joe Quesada, and we all started on the same page. But slowly I began to feel that Bill misunderstood the fashion aspect of mainstream hero books and their need to constantly change with the times. So this part caught my attention because on the previous panel we were talking about how Morrison was very smart using Wolverine as few as possible, because I think that everybody was kind of like fed up with Wolverine because he was like the star of X-Men, not the star of Wolverine. But in this run on Assault on Weapon Plus, you see that he took over the title again. You only see Cyclops, so that maybe not to alienate the readers too much, because this story could have easily fall into Wolverine's title itself.
Yeah.
And then on Planet X, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. It's a 5-parter, and the last part is a double size issue. It was great, but I felt like really he was doing that decompression thing. Like he was
Yeah.
extending something that could have easily worked in 3 numbers, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Rocco, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I one of the things that I think I really liked about it is that, and this is something that has become easier to talk to regular people about since the Marvel movies have come out, is that Captain America, one of the things that I think is a really interesting thing about that character is that, and you see a lot of this in the story with Captain America not even being in it at all, is that although that character was the creation in context as a shoot or as a work, as they say in professional wrestling, he's a creation of the military industrial complex, and he is a propaganda tool, or that's what his intention was to be. He's actually much more than that as a man, right?
Mhm.
And I like the idea that, like, Wolverine is sort of like the redheaded stepchild, so
Yeah.
to speak,
Yeah.
of this whole system. It's like, well, we didn't make you to be a symbol to
Mhm.
help us sell war bonds and to win a war that was a publicly fought war that everyone knew about in the world.
Mhm.
We made you to go and kill people without them knowing about it. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
didn't give you the nice things.
Yeah.
We didn't raise you to be a good boy.
Right.
And that sort of establishes a sort of level of privilege that Steve Rogers has as a character.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, I think it's really cool that it deepened the Captain America story and mythology without Cap even having to really be in it at all.
Mhm.
They played with that in the X-Men Evolution cartoon as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
They said they did what with the X-Men Evolutions? What'd you say?
No, they play with that idea in the X-Men Evolution cartoon as well.
Mhm.
The idea that like Wolverine has like a deep-seated respect for Cap, but there's this kind of, I don't want to say animosity. It's just he doesn't have it towards Cap. It's more towards just like the situation
yeah.
of just what war is and like what the military is and like just how you
And
got
then
wars.
if we can still talk about Warren Ellis, I don't know where we are with them these days. But he did that Avengers book where it was sort of like almost like a sort of an all-star Avengers. Remember that? It was a hardcover that came out.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
endless,
Yeah.
It was a white cover.
Yeah,
like
I don't remember the name of it.
It's like
Secret
endless wartime or something like
That
that.
sounds
Endless
right.
Wartime,
It does sound right.
Yeah.
But Wolverine was in it, and like there's a part where Cap actually says to him, like, I really respect you, but I'm not like you. Because Wolverine was kind of like, let's go have a beer and talk about the people we killed. It's kind of like, I really don't want to. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. And Wolverine throughout the book is like the saint of World War II, never killed anyone.
Right, yeah.
It's like I just don't think about it, man. I just don't think about it.
Which is interesting because Ed Brubaker almost bends backwards to say that Captain America didn't kill anybody in World War II.
Yeah, right. It was all Bucky.
Yeah, it's all Bucky, sure.
I feel like he does, though. I feel like that sort of plays into that too. Of that, like I remember once I read a thing about Olympic level athletes, like gold medalist, like Michael Phelps, like these types of guys. And there was a thing where they would ask people like when you go to the bathroom, do you like the smell? And like people that say no, or like, how tempted are you to eat carbs? Like the people that said like the most like really sort of like denying themselves of the basic human truths are the ones that excel the most because they almost have like, it's almost sociopathic, but not quite, where they can just be like, no, I'm not going to think about it. I think about there's a part in the Brubaker where it's like, it's during the one where they go to England and I think they're on a blimp that's going down or something like that. And like Sharon is trying to save some of the minions and Cap is like, what are you doing? No, we're going. We're leaving. Leave them there. Like it's like he'll say one thing, but when the moment comes, yeah, he'll chop Baron Blood's head off. Like he's got to do, and then he's just got to live with it, you know.
And
absolutely.
I also think that's kind of the interesting thing that differentiates the Marvel universe from the DC universe in a way, where with the DC universe, those are characters that are these like pseudo gods. They kind of are just regular, like a lot of them are just like the regular people who put on costumes and then use that like weird godlike power that they just were born with to like do things.
Mhm.
But in the Marvel universe, these are all characters on some level who are agents of an establishment who do kind of like hail from systems of like military and whatnot, and
Oh, yeah.
they are going to kill people.
Mhm.
Like when the chips are down, it doesn't matter if like Tony Stark will say publicly, "You can't kill people to be an Avenger." Blah blah blah. Like no, like you're gonna have to. They're gonna do some like morally ambiguous things, and that's kind of the thing I think is interesting about the Marvel universe inherently.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's what's baked into the Marvel universe almost in a way. Like I think that's kind of the weird gift that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby gave Marvel in the 60s. It's like, you know what, this is, you know, they say now the world outside your window, but I always kind of looked at it as like, you know, Marvel is a reactive property, like, you know what I mean, and these characters are reactive, like, you know, they aren't always making the best decisions for themselves, and I think that's something that gets kind of lost in these contemporary conversations about these characters where people are like you know, the Avengers are, you know, militaristic and like, you know, they're fascists and all this other stuff. It's like, well, no, but yeah, like that's kind of the deal here. Like these writers are not dumb people. They didn't make these characters like one note. They made them, you know, three-dimensional in that way where it's like, you know, these aspects of these characters can result in some ugly things. Like Tony Stark can get drunk and actually threaten the UN. Peter Parker can like be in the middle of a fight with Wolverine and backhand like a woman, like, and kill her. Like, you know what I mean? Like these are things that happen because they're very flawed characters, and that's what's baked into them. And their world is flawed.
It's all just how far do you want to take that idea?
Right.
How, you know what I mean? Like how quote unquote realistic do we want to get? And you know, like Watchmen is like all the way out, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like what's that Rick Veitch thing, Brat Pack or whatever, where it's
Brat
like
Pack, where it goes all the way
like, this is a kink, this is a part of a psychosis, this is a guy who's psychotic, and he just uses this as an excuse to kill people. Like,
right?
You know, I mean, and it's just like how real you want to get, dog, because we can
go there.
Real. How real do you want to get?
That's kind of the thing with like the nature of superheroes in a way where a lot of people do like to avoid that train of thought because they see it as breaking the concept of the superhero. But then there's other people who kind of see it as a way of just kind of taking what's already there, but doing something a little different with it. Yeah. Which is what I think Morrison does exactly with this run, where he's not. It's not. I mean, so the whole run's not about deconstructing the X-Men, but there are moments of like deconstruction here.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because Planet X, we talk about this, and I think one of the things that I think people misinterpret about this is the Magneto angle to Planet X. And so let's dive into that a little bit because I know we're over an hour. So Planet X, right? Once believed to be dead, Magneto, the X-Men's greatest adversary, has instead been hiding, waiting to make a move against a team that has thwarted his plan again and again. Now, first of all, we're going to talk about this off the break, right? What do you guys think of the twist? Because I can tell you, like straight up, I was reading this book as it was coming out monthly. I was working at a comic shop, and this is all we talked about for a solid 30 days. Like, it was just like we were obsessed with like, oh my God, Magneto Zorn. Like, what the hell? So I'm curious, like, Josh, I want you to start things off. What did you think about the big reveal? And like, you can go in any direction from there.
That was like the biggest one, right? That really hit like a brick. Never saw it coming. And it was like the clues were all over the place.
Yeah.
Again, rereading the book of Super Gods, he mentions that he read a book of Neil Adams where you see this guy walking in Antarctica and with white hair, and you never knew who he was. And at the end of the title, it was Magneto. So he was trying to pull something like that, and he did it. But I think it was like fans' reaction. Like some people, he did such a great job with Zorn that people really care for him, like his backstory and everything. It really fit into anything that in continuity you could have appreciated from any new character, and then having it all turn out Oh man, but the gut in the punch is bigger than the reveal is when he left Xavier unable to walk because he was already using the nano sentinels. Man,
Yeah.
everything was pulled out together. He was able to heal them because, of course, he was able to destroy the sentinels because he controls metal, and he was influencing the new guys, the ones that were more susceptible or more impressed.
Mhm.
And also we can talk about this now, but in Riot and Xavier's, when the human are attacking the kids, the special class,
Mhm.
he destroys them
Yeah.
all, and you see
Yeah.
this dark side of Zorn, like, wow, he
Ooh.
just destroyed everyone.
Right.
But then you come back to this and you go, oh yeah, of course he was going to destroy them all.
Right. The dark side was already there. Like it was the light
Yeah.
side that was something new. And I
Yeah.
actually love that they actually play with that idea of like, I mean, well, here's my big thing is like people kind of look at this as being like hypocritical of Magneto. Like Magneto being hypocritical and not being the character he's always been. But my thing is like Magneto's always been a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
always, like, and that's kind of the thing I've always found compelling about him is why I like that character is because, yes, he can go from being their villain, the greatest villain, to being their ally, depending on the scenario. So yeah, I'm 100% behind that. And I absolutely love that aspect of it. Don't love everything about Planet X, but I definitely love that aspect of it. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Josh. Were you about to say something else?
Just one more thing. Again, Morrison is very savvy, right? He reads stuff and he knows stuff. Um, and I'm pretty sure that again, Magneto being from Germany and being a Jew that was being hunted after,
Mhm.
it's a little bit of an allegory for me in the way that Hitler rise to power, right? Because Germany was already destroyed after World War One, the people was at its lowest, and there was a vulnerable part in the country, in the people,
Mhm.
and Hitler took part of that, and that's how the Nazi power
Yeah.
rise. So
Mhm.
Magneto did the same thing. He went with the people that had lowest self-esteem, and he was able to influence them. They were more controllable, and starting with Kid Omega, right, which
Mhm.
was the prize pupil of Xavier,
Yeah. Yeah.
super susceptible to his influence.
Yeah.
Um, but he still did it with the rest of the team, right? Like when Kid Omega was out of the picture, he still influenced and corrupted one of the Step for Cuckoos,
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and he was corrupted himself because, of course, I see the character of Magneto doing anything that is necessary for him to achieve his ends.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
consuming the kick, it was a natural progression of the character.
No, for sure. Absolutely. What about you, Rocco? What did you think of Planet X?
I mean, I feel like I'm sounding like a total fanboy on this a little bit, but I loved it. It was one of my favorite moments ever in comics. I remember like where I was and what I was doing. I was sitting on the floor of my living room and I was listening to records. I had my
Yeah.
record player and I was and I was reading the comic and I got to that page and I like stood up and walked around the room. I called the dude who owns the comic shop that I used to go to, and I was like, "Have you read this? Do you know about this?" And he was like, "I heard all about it. I heard about it. I already know." I mean, just I'm so glad I didn't get it spoiled, and I was able
Yeah.
to really hit it. And one of the things that I think was so smart about that is that Zorn and gutsy, just a gutsy thing to do, because Zorn was this like nascience fan favorite character,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And what we've been sort of trained to expect from X-Men going back many years is it's like when there's a new character, it's like, oh, this guy's the new guy. Like
Mhm.
Gambit was the new guy,
Yeah.
Jubilee, Bishop. You know, it's
Yeah.
like first appearance, you're gonna save it. Like, oh, the new hero, and it's like at first he sort of feels like he's sort of tacked on, and you don't know how you feel, but then he has some cool moments, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna buy that action figure. He's cool. I like
Mhm.
this guy.
Mhm.
And then to totally just like flip the script and literally flip the script in that sequence where you see the planet, the map of the world, and it's upside down. It's like, no, we're doing mutant mutant world now. We're going to kill all the humans,
Mhm.
and Africa is going to be called something else, and the place that
Right.
used to be United States is not going to be that anymore. We
Right.
might even do away with continents. Who knows what we're liable to do?
Mhm.
And I just thought it was tremendous. And at that point, I was pretty much just like full speed ahead. I will concede that there was a lot of characterization of Magneto that was sort of tossed aside at this point. But the way that it read to me was that it was like a relapse, right? Because if you read like the earliest Magneto, he's not a nice person.
No.
He's slapping Toad around. He's a jerk. He's just a total piece of garbage.
Yeah.
So it's like, he's taken this drug and all this sort of stuff. This was one of the parts of the series that I wished they could have just dispensed with other continuity and another universe, because Magneto goes and destroys New York.
Yeah.
And nobody else seems to be able to do anything about it. I remember that there's like almost like an offhand conceit where it's like, oh, the Avengers got called to a false alarm and got transported to another world, and
Right.
we're going to destroy New York in four issues and then put it back. And that's I can see where all that is sort of troubling for fans, but overall, I thought it was great. I loved what they did with it.
It makes me wonder if that was the lack of editorial support behind Morrison at that point because of the Gemis thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but at the same time, like, how would that look if they had made it tie in? All of a sudden it's an event, and we have to know like who the Avengers are fighting, and
Right.
the more moving parts with other creators you get, the more likely it is to kind of become.
I'm not sure when Bendis's run on Avengers Assembled starts, but don't they address that in that? Where
They do bring it up. They bring it up in reference to Scarlet Witch's relationship to Magneto.
because like Magneto just shows up to save Scarlet Witch, and everyone's like, "You destroyed New York. You don't get to come back here."
Yeah, right. You don't get to play here.
Yeah. Although something I kind of think is really interesting about Magneto here is that he's kind of played as this. So they do something really interesting where Magneto was kind of seen as this figure of anti-human like radicalism, or like mutant nationalism, but it's not really Magneto. It's not like the man as who's seen as that. It's more so the image of what Magneto is, as like a character in history for a lot of these kids. So when Magneto dies, he's kind of immortalized as whatever they want him to be, in the same way that like a lot of people who don't really read history, I see a lot of people try to say like, oh, this is what Huey Newton would really say. This is what like insert historical figure here would say about these events and blah blah blah. And this is why I'm doing this, because they would do that. Blah, blah. And it's like, shut up. You're wrong. Like, first of all, you're wrong. Like Marx wouldn't say that, because Marx wouldn't like say, he would have no context for like the present day in which like he never existed. So that's kind of the interesting thing I think is being done with Magneto, where like after he is dead, he is immortalized, and when he comes back, that was like the worst thing that he ever could have done.
Right.
And Charles Xavier points that out. He's like, Eric, you're a T-shirt. You're like puts on their wall when they're going through a rebellious phase, and you never evolved. You never grew as a person. Which to your Rocco's point about how there's a lot of stuff about Magneto's character thrown out. At the time, I didn't care because I wasn't a big X-Men guy. But now that I've gone back and read some of the Claremont stuff, I see why people have that frustration. But I think it's interesting that like Magneto never grew as a person, within the context of what the story that Morrison's trying to tell. Whereas like everyone else in this whole run did grow. Like Wolverine has an arc and he grows. Scott has an arc through this whole run and he grows. Emma grows. Jean grows. Everybody grows.
Yeah.
But Eric is still on the same like, yeah, I'm going to take over the world, like he was in 1965. Like and because he never matured, everyone just kind of looks at him like this like raging old man who is just kind of, it's comic book guy from The Simpsons. you're not going to take him seriously because he never grew up.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I think is really interesting about what Morrison's doing here, with the character of Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
Or
You
even
could even
Stephen
say that
Wright,
he was
I see that.
projecting Bill Gemas into Magneto because he was like his adversary in real life, and he might have been. Yeah, I don't know. Like
Uh-huh.
he does those things where he takes reality and blends it in with
Oh
his
yeah.
work, right?
Yeah. I
Well,
mean,
no, I think there's something interesting to that. I mean, there is something to that, right? Like, I mean, here is a book about evolution, and Morrison is trying to evolve the series, and he's meeting resistance from editorial, right? Or like, you know, or Bill Jemas more specifically. And so then you have kind of like, yeah, totally a conduit for that. And Magneto, who is like also resisting change because he's trying to beat the same drum he's been beating for what, 40, 50 years, you know? And even Xavier, there's that great line where if you didn't know what the book was about at this point, I can't help you. But there's a great line with Xavier was like, maybe we should just kind of put away all the old manifestos and like try something different. Like, I mean, if you don't get that that's what this book is about at that point, I'm sorry. Like, I got nothing else to say to you about this, you know?
which is also interesting that like you can read this and then immediately go read Hickman's X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are a lot of
skip like 20 years. I mean, I would say definitely definitely read Astonishing. Definitely read Astonishing X-Men because I think that's kind of supported a little bit. Also, what's up? Who did Supernovas? That was that Peter Milligan? Or
No,
Kieran
it
Gillen?
was Mike Carey.
It was Mike Carey. There you go. Yeah, Mike Carey has some good stuff in there. And then, of course, you know, Warren Ellis did a couple of things too. I won't talk about that right now. That were actually pretty decent, particularly Xenogenesis, which are my favorites. But anyway, sorry. Actually, before we exit out of Planet X, I want to jump on over to the other big moment of this particular exit out of Heroes. Here comes exit 2. Here comes tomorrow. I want to point out the big other moment here, right? Which is actually my favorite one of my favorite single issues of this run, which is Jean and Logan stuck on Asteroid M, basically facing death, and Wolverine kind of puts 2 and 2 together and realizes like, I'm gonna have to just kill her now.
Simple as that.
Right, as simple as that. And it ultimately, the prophecy of the Phoenix that the Imperial Guard or the Shi'ar have been telling us early on in the series kind of comes to fruition, and Jean evolves, and then the story kind of goes in a different direction where the X-Men get that what Emma Frost calls the 9th hour plot twist or 9th hour save. But like it's too late. They don't say that's me, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, what did you guys think of the resurrection of Jean Grey, the death and resurrection of Jean Grey? We've seen this done so many other times in the books. Like I think I pointed out before, we've seen her come back on John Byrne's watch in Fantastic Four. We saw her come back again. Actually, it was John Byrne and Mark Silvestri's watch again in the early 90s. I think it was around the Bishop storyline for X-Men as well. And I think she's died a couple other times in between there too that I might be forgetting. But what did you guys think about the death and resurrection? Was there something that sets this apart from those other ones for you? And Josh, I'll let you go. I'll let you start with that.
It was weird when I read it. I remember like these guys are in for it. I mean, Wolverine is already peeling off because of the sun, right? Like the Shi'ar are going to appear, whatnot. And then you see them, they get burned. It was very dramatic.
Yeah.
And this is what Morrison excels at, right? The drama, this specific panel, the drama and the funny stuff. Like, have you grown your eyes back? What do I have to see, right? Like that moment where you're caring so much for the characters, and then it was a great dramatic way. It makes sense that she comes back from the sun, and after being dead, she's the Phoenix. She's going to be reborn. Is the only character that we all know that whenever she dies, she will return. We just expect a cool way for her to return. But I think it's one of the ones that they're not able to do it so well, just in this specific run.
What about you, Joaquin? What do you think of this? What do you think of Planet X's grand finale?
I like it a lot. It's interesting because I didn't really put this together. This is an original thought that I have. I'm just kind of like re-spewing what I saw from another YouTube channel. I think it's like a Imperious Rex. Where they kind of talked about this run, and the sentiment was that Morrison is kind of doing like as much as he is like kind of remixing the X-Men, he's also kind of hitting the like, you know, greatest hits notes that everyone else was doing before him.
Oh, for sure.
Where you do have an arc with the Shi'ar. You do have an arc where, you know, oh, we have to go to the secret past of Wolverine, or like, there's a whole thing with here's a new character. Oh, Magneto's back. Ooh. And then you get to this where it's like another death of Jean Grey. But he's hitting all these notes, but he's doing it in a way where it's just slightly different. Slightly different. He even does like a Days of Futures Past time travel thing, you know, like with the arc after this.
Here it comes
or is it this arc? But yeah, no, I think it speaks to the quality of writer that Morrison is. And was this Phil Jimenez doing the art?
Yeah, it's Phil Jimenez. Yep.
Okay. I love Phil Jimenez. I really wish this was done by Quietly.
I think it would have been interesting. Yeah, that would have been really interesting. And as much as I like Jimenez, I feel like this is one of those ones like I wish Quietly had done as well. But maybe I kind of, knowing what we know now about the scenario, I'm kind of like, maybe Morrison was like, you know, just go back to DC. I'll be right behind you.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate because I really think, even though terrible person, but I don't want to say terrible person, but like a canceled person, Ethan Van Sciver, said this in an interview a couple years ago. I completely agree with him when he said that it really should have just been Morrison and Quietly on this book together. They should have just like the whole thing. But
ideally, yeah. But I'm more than certain that Quietly would have been able to crank out a monthly title like this for this long. I don't think.
Yeah. Is Quietly? So maybe I'm getting Quietly and Hitch confused, but Quietly's not a slow artist, is he?
I don't think he's a slow artist, but I think the level of detail that he kind of goes into, I wouldn't call him slow. I just think that he goes into a level of detail that doing 60 issues of a monthly book is just not going to allow him to do.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with Hitch.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny because I say this as like an artist too, so please don't hate me, guys. Internet, I'm sorry. I do art too, so these are just things that us artists say to each other, even in like a loving terms. But it's a thing where we weren't quite at that point yet, where we are now, where you just switch artists out randomly and arbitrarily, even sometimes within the same issue. We weren't there yet. But and I don't know if there's like a whole time crunch thing, but I think some books, and especially this book, you can get away with there being some delays. I think you can get away with there being some, especially with X-Men, where there's like 30 X-Men books coming out at any given moment. I think you can get away with that. But yeah, no, I think him and his art is brilliant here, especially with some of the more heightened, like that, exactly that. The more like heightened, bombastic, operatic moments with Wolverine killing Magneto, and I love the way that page goes. Either it's this one or the next one, where Jean is slowly dying. That's beautifully handled. Yes, this one. That's one of my favorite pages in this run. It's really good. And Emma Frost in the background too, which I think is interesting for what happens later. But yeah, no, I like this arc a lot. I have nothing else to add beyond I like it. I think it good. It good.
Anybody else want to throw anything in here before we jump to the grand finale of Here Comes Tomorrow?
Here Comes Tomorrow.
Yeah, for me, I maybe the third X-Men comic that I ever read when I was maybe like 6 or 7 years old, and the first one I ever read that had Jean Grey was the classic X-Men. I don't remember which issue number. I'm never good with that, but it was the one where Jean Grey is going off to die to pilot the space shuttle, the very first time they did the Phoenix or anything.
Oh.
And since it was a classic X-Men book, it had the backup. Remember how they did that? Claremont wrote those
with John Bolton art.
Yeah, and and it was sort of like a Star Wars special edition. It was like X-Men special edition. Like he kind of went in there and sort of goosed the plot along so that it made more sense for things that they did later. So I was sort of in a position, and maybe this is the same for you guys too, given our age, or your age, since I think I'm older than you guys. But I never read a version of X-Men where Jean Grey literally was Phoenix and died. Like I read the book where Jean Grey has horrible radiation poisoning and she turns gray and her hair is falling out, and the Phoenix comes to her as almost like this Christ-like figure, and it's like, I'll put you in a cocoon where you can heal and I'll take your place, and that'll be cool for everybody. That'll work out great. So that was the version of the Phoenix Saga that I read first. Was the sort of the retcon.
The retcon, right? That was the John Byrne one. That was the Fantastic Four story, I think, right?
Yeah, right. So that she could be in X Factor.
Right.
The whole thing, because that was going to be Dazzler, and that's a whole other thing.
And they adapt that wonderfully in X-Men Dark Phoenix, don't they?
You're talking about I never even saw it, man. I was like, I'm not going to even.
Probably for the best.
So yes, but that was something that struck a deep chord with me. Was to have Jean Grey die again in such a way. It was,
and even I also kind of appreciate how she dies in a very subtle, like understated way. It's not like big and epic. It's just like, gives her an aneurysm and she dies.
Yeah. No, I love that. I like that it's at the hands of Magneto. I'm like, who could take her down? And I was like, well, Magneto's just been holding on to this power for apparently a really long time, and he just unleashes it all on her and gives her an aneurysm, which I was like, all right, I'll take it. I'm with it.
Wolverine kills him.
And Wolverine kills him. There you go. And he's on kick. We got to remember that. I think people forget that, right? He's on kick. This is Magneto on drugs. This is your Magneto on drugs. This is a Magneto. This is a Magneto at its best. So, right. All right, let's do Here Comes Tomorrow so we can wrap this up. 150 years in the future, the survivors of Planet X battle for control of the Phoenix Egg from Beast. All right, guys. So this is one that I think this and Assault and Weapon Plus I had to read a couple of times before I actually kind of got in line with it. It wasn't that I disliked it, but it just felt abrupt. And I think that's something that we've kind of already unpacked as to why that is. But yeah, thoughts on Assault and Weapon Plus. I'm sorry, Here Comes Tomorrow. Josh, what are your thoughts?
For me, it shows the great writer that Morrison is, right? When he started, again, going back to the manifesto, I think that he already wrote these 4 numbers. He already had them wrapped up, and he was ready. He knew where he was going with New X-Men, because again, we are able to pick up and end up with a bang with these 4 numbers. They were great. They are like nothing compared to the previous 2 sagas that we had. And the cherry on top was having Mark Silvestri, right? Everybody, I think I was scared because, oh my God, hopefully it's not another Jim Lee, Fantastic Four, or Rob Liefeld, Captain America. As much as I love those 2 artists, that one that didn't feel that good. So I was like, with Mark Silvestri, hopefully it doesn't happen that much. But he's throwing out some great art. Green Beanie mentioned, this is Days of Future Past on crack. You're having great images. You are wondering what's going on there. Why is Beast the villain? You are having another reveal, which is John Sublime's, of course, affecting pretty much the entire run of New X-Men since day one. So I really love it. When I was my kid was seeing me reading these comics, right? So he started reading it as well, and he was like, "Hey, Cassandra Nova is the villain for the whole run, right?" And I'm like, "There are 3 villains, and this is it, right?" Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cassandra Nova, Magneto, and of course John Sublime. And as the name implies, he was behind the really mastermind behind everything.
Yeah.
We are seeing Morrison at his best, throwing out a lot of great ideas that only occupy one panel or one page. and then we never see them again, and we want to, right? Like having these crawlers that are mixed up with a little bit of Gen X from some of the more mutants that can take advantage of it, like Multiple Man, and then having wings like Angel, the Optic Blast from Cyclops. And I think, again, like going back to Jonathan Hickman, when I don't remember the name that he uses for those mutants that are inbreds of different mutants, that they have the DNA code of several mutants, I think he comes back again to this well, right? Like Morrison is a pool of ideas, and you can pick out any. I remember I was looking for it, but I don't remember the name of this X-Men that was here, and he was a whale. I mean,
that's right. Yeah, that was a thing. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
that was the whale guy.
I mean, like he's throwing out these great ideas. I think that this was like he was saving Wolverine for this specific story, because you can see again that he is one of the most important characters out of that run. You can see Eve, from after Phantom X has died 150 years in the future, she's still alive, and she's a hot robot right now. But you see that the continuity from within Grant's run. You see Tito, right, the grandson of Angel and Beak, and I did not even remember this part. I asked Sai, like, "Hey, is Cassandra Nova, was Ernst Cassandra Nova?" And in this run, they answered that, right? She's there with Martha Washington in a brain, and these are the new X-Men. It was great. Like, he's giving us this moment, and this is something that I forgot to point out. And in the previous, some numbers, some panels, some pages from Grant Morrison's, I don't know. It has not happened to me with any other comic. Like, you kind of hear the music when you're seeing these images. Like when you're seeing these X-Men walking, you can see like that kind of Monster Incorporated music, like, or Armageddon music that they're walking towards.
Oh no, that is a straight up, like, this right here is Michael Bay 101. Like this is, or at the very least, Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson 101. Like, this is very clearly like a pull directly from that, and I love that. Yeah, you can totally hear the, some sort of Hans Zimmer mark at that point, right?
Yes, he does. He's also to wrap up things that we thought that were already wrapped up, like whatever happened to Kid Omega, right? And we are seeing the White Hot Room, where you can see the people that are worth it, kind of like in an Excalibur way, all the people that are worth it, that have become Phoenix in their own either realities or planets or dimensions or whatever. And of course, Jean Grey is the one that fixes the universe, and we see Kid Omega there standing, right? And as I mentioned before, like, I try to see this run only these 41 issues. It's so contained, and it's a bittersweet moment, like, to see the whole potential that Kid Omega had. He could have become the next Phoenix, and because of the impulsiveness and the matureness that he needed, he wasn't able to achieve or fulfill all his role. But in the afterlife, he was able to. So it's a great run. How Jean is able to fix continuity and gives her blessing so that Scott can continue being with Emma.
Yeah,
it was great. It was a great closure for a great run on my part. And having the art again from Mark Silvestri was amazing.
Yeah, I think this, for me, like, I feel, I think Derek had mentioned before that typically you would, like, it's the writer who's trying to keep up with the artist, but I feel like with Grant Morrison, it's definitely the artist trying to keep up with Grant Morrison, and I think that Silvestri does a decent enough job with it. I mean, of course, like the ultimate is Frank Quitely, right? Sorry. Yeah, it's Frank. I'm sorry. It's like the ultimate artist who can keep up with Grant Morrison is Frank Quitely, right? But I think Silvestri does a decent job. I think that there's some sort of, like, there's some aspects of just, like, 90s-ness I think I get with Silvestri that I don't think necessarily fits here, but at the same time, Silvestri worked on the X-Men, and you're trying to bring things full circle, and Morrison's trying to tell like an all-encompassing story. So yeah, get Mark Silvestri because you can't get Jim Lee, right? So
If I may add something to what you just mentioned, it's very funny because I was thinking, like in the previous podcast, I mentioned like why they didn't replace Igor Corday with either Salvador La Roca or Sean Chen, which are great artists. But I think that even Grant's vision for New X-Men was like, I don't want to have any artist that looks like 90s X-Men or 80s X-Men because this is my own thing, right? Like we're going to do it my own way. I think this run was reserved for Frank Whiteley, but having again the editorial interference here, they might have forced him to have Mark because again, as great as the art is, it still is not the same thing. It doesn't sing as well as with Phil Jimenez or Ethan Van Sciver or of course Frank Whiteley.
yeah.
Well, if I may, I'd like to kind of take back and rework what I said earlier about quietly. Anybody should have been the main artist on this. I would disagree with myself a little bit in saying that I think all of the artists here are great artists, no doubt, and I think that you can like have an arc with Phil Jimenez, you can have an arc with Ethan Van Sciver, you can have an arc with Mark Silvestri. I just think that they were put on the wrong arcs. And that might just be like a scheduling thing because this is the thing that I just kind of realized with comics. Like it's that's an industry that like worked on crunch time, and like when you're on the crunch time and you're on the clock, you're gonna make some impulsive decisions that in the moment just you got to do it. So I get that, but I think out of all the art changes done here, where Quietly isn't the artist, I like this one the most. I think that this two-part story with the dark future where Beast has been corrupted and Jean has to like in a metacosmic way like fix it by like making Scott okay with wanting to be with a woman that's not him or not her, or just like moving on and like evolving himself. I think that all works with the like kind of Michael Bay-esque like high octane like action movie that this two-part story is. And I really, but part of me also I just love the last page with Emma and Scott at the grave. I think that's such a beautiful moment, and I love Quietly. I don't know if he could have done that scene that way. That kind of the emotional reaction that I had when reading it. They're just some artists that I think they're great for that moment. Like I don't think any artist could have done the silent issue besides Quietly.
No, not that way.
Yeah, and for my money, I don't think anyone could have done these last two issues besides Silvestri. I just think something works about it in a way where Morrison's not even writing how I would kind of like sometimes in my head just unconsciously pigeonholing Morrison in like a way where it's like, no, he's the weird guy. He's gonna do a weird thing. This is him doing like the action movie. And like that. That's yeah. Silvestri and Morrison were just they're firing on all cylinders here for me.
What about you, Rocco? What are your thoughts on Here Comes Tomorrow?
I think it was cool. As somebody that doesn't have a ton of warm fuzzies about the 90s, which is funny, I know, since the thing I'm most well known for right now.
Yeah.
Right place, right time on that. I like it.
Sure.
The fact that he got Silvestri to make an X-Men comic and he got him back after how many years, and it's a version of the X-Men that is virtually unrecognizable as X-Men. There's a certain sort of a subversive kick to that I like, that I enjoy, that I think is cool. I remember, I feel like my feeling at the time was that it was like, there's this sort of thing, you see this a lot with like Alan Moore, like in Miracle Man, he did this a lot, and like Jack Kirby, like with New Gods, where it's sort of this thing where it's like, but wait, I wasn't done with that idea, and you're already throwing another thing at me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about this.
Mm-hmm.
But I dug it. I thought it was cool. Very imaginative stuff. Definitely something that I had to sort of sit with for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way that it wrapped up as being like, this is the future. Oh, just kidding. It's not, because we Zig and still in this very moment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sort of wonderfully subversive. I kind of enjoy the fact that, to the best of my knowledge, this was sort of left alone. Like, I don't think these characters have been back since, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually, one of the things I wanted to point out actually about Morrison's run is, well, like, we talked a little bit about, like, in the last stream, about how Chris Claremont, from my understanding, was not a fan of what Morrison was doing at the time, right? But I think that Grant Morrison in general kind of does this really interesting, cool thing that is very old school when he writes, which is that he introduces, you were talking about ideas, he introduces ideas so that other writers can pick them up and do something with them.
Yeah.
And if the writers don't do something with it, that's not a failure on Morrison's part. That's kind of just a missed opportunity on the people that came in after him.
Which they couldn't wait. I mean, they couldn't wait. And I remember that Alan Davis is one of my all-time favorite creators. I think he's a great writer as well as a great artist. His Excalibur run, where he wrote as well as did the art, to me is some of the best comics of all time. And it was like, okay, obviously they're going to do everything they can to just undo all of this. And it was like Claremont and Davis were doing a book, and then Whedon and John Cassidy were doing the other. And I remember that I was like looking forward to them, and I bought all those comics. But now, 20 years, however many years later, I don't remember anything about those, and I remember all this stuff. Like, so
no, I mean,
that tells you a lot, you know.
No, I mean, like, the no matter who the artist is, there's definitely an aspect of the imagery that just burns itself into your memory. Burns itself into your memory for sure.
It's the imagination, like lightning.
It is. It really is. It really is. And like, I
don't remember the issue after the last one of Morrison, and it sucked, man. And even though it has Salvador La Roca's art, Salvador La Roca is.
Wasn't it? It was
fantastic
Boston, and it was like they were like repairing the mansion and stuff. And like,
yeah. Well, I think that first arc was all about, like, just kind of setting the whole Zorn thing straight.
It was a two-parter. Chuck Austin, if I'm not mistaken.
Couldn't wait to bicycle that back, you know.
Right? Yeah.
And I find it. I mean, it's all fan fiction.
Yeah, it is. It is. Like,
beyond the original creators, especially when it's a big corporation that owns it. These stories, you know, the Image comic that I worked on is as much a real thing. It's the same. It's made up of lines on paper. You know what I mean?
Right.
It or ignore it. Whatever works best for you.
I mean, that's the reality, I think, of superhero comics, right? Like, I kind of figured this out actually in the 90s when things kind of, the bottom kind of fell out. I was like, okay, now they're just kind of in the bad way, as opposed to what they ended up doing later. In the bad way, they kind of were like, let's just try anything and see what sticks. And so they were just kind of tossing out everything. It was like, well, Peter Parker's not Spider-Man anymore. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they were just kind of tossing all these things out there to kind of see what it works. And I kind of had to make peace with the fact that, you know what, it's about the arc and what that writer's intention was. And, you know, if people pick up on it after that, that's cool. But that's not a guarantee, and I kind of have to make peace with that. And I think that Morrison's run really underlined that, because in my head, this run go like the X-Men runs kind of go basically Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, right? Like some Ramita issues in between, some Silvestri issues in between, and Days of Future Past is kind of like the grand finale, and somewhere in the middle of that is Grant Morrison's run. But to me, it's all part of one continuity, but they don't necessarily gel together. That's just that's my own headcanon, like, you know?
Yeah.
So, and like, yeah, I think it's really up to the writers after them to to pick up on it or not. And I think it's very telling that a lot of writers, their writers immediately following Here Comes Tomorrow, didn't pick up on these things. But the writers that came like 2, 3, 4, 20 years later are like pulling from this, because they're like, there's so many ideas here. I remember being kind of disappointed in the Avengers X-Men crossover because they reintroduced the Phoenix, and like, I thought that they were going to do this thing that Morrison introduced, which was, hey, the Phoenix can The Phoenix is here to manage realities. You know what I mean? And when the Phoenix shows up, that means that a reality is probably going to get dissected. And they didn't do that. And I had to make peace with the fact. Well, I guess that's my headcanon. That's what Morrison wanted, but that's not what everybody else wanted.
But, yeah, unfortunately, that to your point about that's just kind of the way superhero comics are, and like ongoing medium comics are.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's very easy to just kind of make fun of the people who like go into the local comic shop and say they ruined the continuity and blah blah blah. But like, I do that in my head too.
Yeah.
What book was it that came out last week? It was like one of the. I think it was like Mr. Miracle came out last week. And there's a whole thing where it's like, the new Mr. Miracle is a black guy, and it's like, Shala Norman's been Mr. Miracle since 2009. Where you been?
That character goes way back. That was like in the 90s, I think.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. James Amos.
So it's just kind of that thing where you just kind of have to like, no, I like this arc, and the rest didn't happen.
Right. I mean, you kind of have to do that. You have to do that.
You just got to like, I like Spider-Man a lot. There is a whole decade of stuff I just ignore.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For me, Spider-Man could have ended with the death of Gwen Stacy.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And that's kind of the interesting thing about comics. That I think is interesting. Like, a lot of people have that golden era, and then they ignore everything else. But then they have another thing they like, which is say, well, you can put that in there too. I like that one too. But yeah, that's just kind of the fascinating thing about superhero comics, where it's a lot like how religion is viewed in like the Western world, where you can just like pick and choose what you want.
You're right.
And just ignore the stuff that you don't want. That's inconvenient for you.
A la carte continuity.
Yeah, the
continuity. Buffet style continuity.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's nice when you get to the point that you've aged out of anybody's demographic, because then it's like there's no pressure. It's like, oh well, it's not for me anyway. I'm
right.
Yeah.
By default, I'm considered too smart to fall for your shtick here. So
right. No, I've recently kind of come to that too. So I totally understand what you mean by that.
Yeah.
So closing thoughts on Grant Morrison's new X-Men. Let's line it up here. Josh, you've been quiet. What's your closing thoughts? What are your parting words on Grant Morrison's new X-Men?
For me, it's like there's this documentary called Room 237 where a bunch of fans analyze The Shining from Stanley Kubrick. And it's very great because a lot of people makes analogies like it's a metaphor for the Apollo 13. It's a metaphor for the Nazi rise. It's a metaphor for how the American natives were slaves. It's an analogy for everything, right? And the interesting thing is that everybody's right when they are really looking at the hints. So Morrison's run, for me, it's a lot of things. It has a lot of different meanings for a lot of different readers. Right, everybody finds a lot of different things here, but I think that the themes that he touched upon, no other comic was doing it. I remember when I saw Avengers from Kurt Busiek and George Perez. It was a great looking comic. It was very exciting, but I still felt that it was being written as in the 80s, right? Like those type of old school comics, because I read those and I love them. And New X-Men was the only thing that really felt modern in continuity, besides the Ultimate Universe, because they were doing that stuff. But for me, that was like the testing ground. If Captain America is cool this way, let's put it into continuity there.
Right.
But Grant Morrison really started making these characters great. Again, huge ideas. He took it to the next level. You can see that he loves and respects a lot of Chris Claremont's work on the 17 years that he was into these comics, because he was pulling out ideas from Claremont, and he took it to the next level. It was just ready for somebody else to grab it and go wild for it, but they went the safe side, revisiting again stories like Rocco mentioned. You don't even remember what they were about at the same time.
Right.
So definitely, it's one of the. I don't know if I could just think about it really quick. I think it's in the top 10, if not top 5 best stories or best runs from Marvel from all time.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's definitely memorable. What about you, Joaquin? What do you think of Grant Morrison's run overall? And also, you need to point out you actually were not an X-Men fan, if I remember correctly.
No, not
For
really.
instance, right?
But I think a lot of that just kind of comes into the point of like when I grew up, X-Men was kind of seen as the thing that kind of like petered out in the 90s and was still kind of like limping along, just kind of grandfathered into the 21st century. So I kind of grew up with that mindset and like with that idea, at least when it comes to comics, because like when I was a kid, like the X-Men was like all over like the movies and the TV shows and whatnot. But like as far as comics were concerned, the X-Men was kind of like the thing that had their heyday. They had their time in the sun, but it was like kind of grandfathered out. But yeah, no, like this is fantastic. And honestly, I don't know like what me and like a bunch of like my friends who were reading comics at the time were thinking, because this came out around that time when we were like reading comics and we just ignored it. Don't know why. That's like the whole thing of like looking back in your childhood, be like, that was stupid. I don't know. I thought that when I was 8, but I was clearly dumb to think that no shade towards Straczynski, but this is light years ahead of the Straczynski run on Spider-Man and some of the stuff with the Bendis Avengers. Maybe it's just like I'm kind of at this point now where like this material is resonating with me a little more personally. But yeah, this is great. This is probably my favorite. It's probably my favorite thing from the X-Men period. Even like with the Hickman stuff in my head, this is still like great. All the characters were, yeah. But, oh, my bad. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. What about you?
I'm rambling. So good. Yeah.
No, that's all good. What about you, Rocco? Oops, just kicked Joaquin off the stream. My bad. Okay. What about you, Rocco? Closing thoughts on the new X-Men run?
Man, I tell you, I'm at a point now where I really consider myself fortunate to have been able to be getting these books when they were coming out.
Yeah.
And to be able to have a young adulthood perspective on it. And having had many years of dealing with X-Men comics previously,
so
that I could really appreciate just how far out it was, and also to sort of I was in the place of life where I could compute what was happening and appreciate it. It was so fun to be able to get these as they were coming out. It was very exciting stuff. I'll talk a little bit about the Big Bug Room, which was before the part of the run that we're talking about, but. In a different season of my life, I dealt with a lot of depression and anxiety, which can unfortunately be the same thing in some cases. And I used the idea of the Big Bug Room to sort of maneuver myself through some of the most troubling moments of my life. I would literally picture myself in that room with that giant cockroach and imagine the visceral cockroaches. Arms and legs sort of moving around to sort of shock myself out of things that I would be obsessing about in my head. And when you get to that point, when you're talking about science fiction or superhero comic books that have ways that you can sort of utilize to make yourself have a better state of mental health, I can't think of a higher compliment to pay anything.
No, absolutely. No, again, I mentioned this before. This run for me is the whole reason I wanted to do these roundtables in the first place. As you can tell, like we talked about this for 2 hours, so there's a lot to unpack, and we didn't even scratch the surface. But at the same time, this I mentioned this before. This Authority, Ultimate Spider-Man, Preacher, and New X-Men. I kind of discovered all those around the same time, and I stopped reading comics. And this got me back into comics, and I've been in comics ever since then. Like, I had that phase in the 90s where, like, it was cool and it was fun. And like, I got to do that. But locking me into comic books, it started with like those books. And this is definitely one of them. So, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate you
Thank
hanging out
you.
with me for 2
It's great.
hours.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I kind of suspected that this was going to run a little long, so I didn't want to cut us off. I know we normally do an hour of this, but my hope is that, like, this will get archived on Previews World, and then 20 years from now, 150 years from now, people will go back and be like, "What the hell is this book?" And then hopefully we've created some insight that can last, and sustain people beyond just today. So, thanks again, Rocco. Where can people find you?
I have roccojerome.com is my website.
All right.
From there, you can find my books on Amazon. I do a weekly radio show on lrs102.com. Play music.
Okay.
On that. I do a lot of different things, man. I'm always trying things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In the not too distant future, I hope to make more comics, but I don't want to jinx it.
No, I'm with it. What about you, Joaquin? Where can people find you? Tell people about your YouTube.
I have a YouTube channel. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter at the Mystical Green Beanie.
All right, cool. And last but not least, Josh, thank you so much for pushing me to do this and helping me find the research tools for it. Where can people find you? Because people need to hear more from you about comics.
Again, I'm trying to squeeze my way in wherever I can. People can find me in Instagram at Josh Loves Comics. I am also working on a Facebook page where it's gonna be called Analyze and Critiques from Comic Books. And then you can find me on Wizard Magazine, the bootleg edition #2. I hope that you like it. And I'll be having some more material further on. And thanks. That's it. Thank you, Troy, for giving us the space to chat about this, because I think that everybody's missing it, right? To gather around the fire in a comic book store and talk about what we love best in the world.
No, and that's exactly what this is for. And I'm going to take this last comment as the best compliment ever, which is someone said, finally an OCD friendly podcast. Look, we were going to get into the weeds and we were going to obsess over it. That was bound to happen. That's why I did it. So much appreciated. Thank you, Polar Knights. And thank you for tuning in to Previews World, guys. Enjoy your weekend. For those of you that tapped out a little early, you can catch us, of course, on our YouTube, on our Facebook, and on our Twitch. And that's across the board. Previews World is also being hosted on Free Comic Book Days Facebook as well. And, we say this all the time, but I actually mean it, and I mean it every single time. We brought the comic book store to you, the comic book store conversation to you. So I look forward to seeing you guys at the spinner rack the next go round. I'll catch you later.